if you read section 36(4), it clearly requires that the SOEs, if they have their special statute or other rules and regulations, shall be make within 1 year. It should be aligned with this law, and I think an effort has to be made in this respect. Right now, I can tell you that we're working on a policy with the government. Obviously, their input, our input is being taken. To answer your question, yes, there are, and the law itself conceives that, and there is a mechanism of 1 year period is given in which we all have to ensure that these inconsistencies are removed. We are also receiving a lot of queries, everything probably every day since its promulgation, as to the applicability of this law. People are a little confused as to when this law will be, which laws to follow, the PSC or SOE. And the other issue is the certain inconsistencies. For example, independent directors, the requirement of independent directors is 1/3 in the PSC. Over here, it is majority. But I think the law itself conceives that there will be a time lag between the application of the law itself and the reality on the ground. So I think at least we have some time, at least in a year, to ensure that we are consistent. And as we go along, whatever is required on our part, from our help desk, we are providing if there's some query, they are welcome to ask us and we do clarify. But we all need to understand this is also a new law. We're also going through it, trying to understand and trying to align. And I think the policy that will come, surely which is in a very advanced stage, will clarify many things.
Thank you so much. I know you have to attend a commission meeting, and hopefully we'll see you at the last session at 12:30.
Thank you very much.
Dr. Junaid,
Yes.
Ahmed Saab, you've been working very closely with the SOEs in various professional capacities for the last 40 years.
Yes.
You may have noted that in 1947, Pakistan inherited 12 SOEs, and today the tally is 212 SOEs. Would you please quickly and briefly give us an historical perspective on the institutional reforms governing the SOEs in Pakistan?
That you have, Assalamu alaikum, and it's a pleasure to be on this very illustrious panel. Yes, you're absolutely right. At the time of partition, there were only 12 SOEs that Pakistan had inherited. During the 50s and the 1960s, two large organizations added a number of SOEs, WABDA and Pakistan Industrial Development Corporation. The PIDC from 1954, when it was established, till 1974, developed 120 plus industrial projects all over the country. But then out of these 120 projects, 60 projects were privatized by PIDC itself. And there was no privatization commission, no such big rigmarole, and PIDC had done that. But then in the 1970s, Mr. Zulfikar Ali Bhutto took charge, and he went through a massive nationalization process where all banks, industry, and other financial institutions, insurance companies, manufacturing companies, even universities, and were nationalized. And the number swelled quite a bit, more than 380, about 400. And this life continued in one form or the other. In the 1980s, during the days of General Ziaul Haq, there was a 3D program of deregulation, decontrol, etc. And eventually in 1990s, privatization process started. And from 1990s till about 2012, quite a few entities were privatized. About 172 units were privatized, and we are left with 212. Out of these 212, about 85 SOEs are commercial entities, and 44 SOEs are non-commercial. They are trusts and foundations, etc. Are you able to show this slide a bit? which I had sent you. Is it possible? No, if not, then doesn't matter. The 85 state-owned enterprises, which I've just mentioned about, own only almost about 98% of the government of Pakistan's assets. And these commercial SOPs also contribute to nearly 100% of the losses of these, which the government of Pakistan has to bear. These 85 commercial SOEs belong to 7 subsectors. The power sector has 20 units. We are all familiar with the power producers, the power distributors, power transmission, etc. About 20 units there. Infrastructure, oil and gas entities are also 13, which are Oil and Gas Development Corporation, Pakistan Petroleum Limited, State Petroleum and Refining, etc. So there are about 13 of these. In the case of infrastructure, transport and communication, there are 7 entities, which are organizations like the National Highway Authority and the Port Qasim and the Gwadar Port and the Karachi Port Trust, etc. There are 7 of these. And the manufacturing and engineering companies are 15. Most of them are under the Ministry of Industries and Production. Then we have got 20 financial institutions, which is National Bank of Pakistan and 7 joint venture investment companies. There is still Industrial Development Bank of Pakistan still around, the SME Bank, the First Women's Bank, etc. About 20 of these. There are 7 companies and 7 commercial SOEs that operate a number of industrial estates, which is National Industrial Parks Management Company. Then there are some SEZs which have also established their own management companies. There are wholesale retail trade companies, which is PASCO and Trading Corporation of Pakistan and others. And then there are also retail and wholesale companies. The utilities, the Utilities Corporation, etc. These are also quite a few. Now, I have provided a list of these, and I think I would request Balan to make them available as a part of this exercise as well. I think it will be quite a learning exercise to just see as to how many. Now, these 85 SOEs also have 83 subsidiaries. And I would request you to have a look at this list of 83 subsidiaries, and you're going to be amazed as to how many of these commercial state-owned enterprises have gone ahead and established SOE, their own subsidiaries. Pakistan National Shipping Corporation has about 8 or 9 subsidiaries, shipping companies. Khairpur Shipping we have, Sialkot Shipping we have, I don't understand what these companies and the subsidiaries, some of the subsidiaries are doing, but I think we should know this. The problems, last point. The non-commercial entities basically includes trusts, and there are quite a few trusts. We may not have paid attention to these. The Evacuate Trust Property Board, the National Trust for Disabled, Hazara Hill Tracks Trust, Punjab Welfare Trust, Sargoda Improvement Trust, Unit Trust of Pakistan, Trust Leasing and Investment, Trust Mudaraba. There are quite a few foundations, and Fauji Foundation is not owned by the government of Pakistan. It is the National Book Foundation, the National Police Foundation, Overseas Pakistanis Foundation, Pakistan Science Foundation, Balochistan Education Foundation, National Zakat Foundation, etc. There is also a Managing Directors Education Foundation. There is a Punjab Teaching Foundation, etc. So these have been around. There are quite a few regulatory bodies, AGRA, PEMRA, NEPRA, and PNRA, which is Pakistan Nuclear Regulatory Authority. And there are 33 universities. There are about 10 R&D institutions. Now, all of these put together do constitute about 212, and there is a huge amount to be managed. Over a period of last 50 plus years, various attempts have been made. First of all, during the days of Mr. Zulfikar Ali Bhutto, a Board of Industrial Management was established. And the purpose of Board of Industrial Management was exactly the same as the Central Monitoring Unit that is being proposed now in this SOE Act. And it did function for some time. Now, as the government of Mr. Bhutto was folded up, in comes the General Zia's government. And of course, he had to have something different. And he created the Experts Advisory Cell. The experts advisory cell was doing exactly the same function as the central monitoring unit and was also helping the controlling and administrative ministries formulate policies which this SOE Act requires, that these controlling ministries will establish their own mechanisms and the policies of what the state-owned enterprises which their ministry controls or manages, as to how and in what areas will be growing and developing, etc. So this is the sort of the historical background, and I have seen most of it happen in front of my own eyes, and also have participated in some of these. The SOE Act, having said all of this, it does bring, in my opinion, the following most critical things. Mm-hmm. And I've participated in many board meetings of many SOEs. By the way, at this point in time, the Ministry of Finance is the custodian of all the shares of the federal government, which are kept at the Ministry of Finance. And there is an additional secretary of the Ministry of Finance who is also responsible for managing these shareholdings, and is also responsible for informing the Finance Ministry and the government regarding their functioning and their performance. But having said this, I've also seen nominee directors coming in from the Ministry of Finance, Ministry of Industries and Production, Ministry of Petroleum, and others, who are nominated directors, but unfortunately, they do not take their position as the representatives of the owners and act as owners. And because they don't act as owners, many of the decision making at a board level and even subsequently does not happen in the manner. I think one of the greatest things that this SOE Act is doing is saying quite clearly that the controlling ministries or the administrative ministries and the federal government will have to act like active shareholders, which means that they will have to be a lot more prepared. They would have to participate in the board meetings and in the committees very seriously and always come prepared, and their assent or dissent to be noted properly. So I think that alone will be a very major improvement that I should see. I think that is the historical background, and that's where we have reached. And I think this SOE Act, if implemented properly, will certainly help in the overall management and improvement of these 212 SOEs.
Thank you so much, Dr. Saab. Thank you so much. We'll move on to our second panel. We have to move along the session. Requesting Mr. Amir Hashmi to... Amir Hashmi Saab was the chairman of the Special Technology Zones Authority. He has recent and relevant experience with respect to implementing a nationwide law, a complicated law, which is a Special Tech Zone Authority law. So we'll ask him to shed some light on, draw on his own experiences firstly. And the specific question to him is, what institutional reforms need to be implemented by the federal government to ensure that SOEs provide economic growth to the nation? Amir Saab.
Assalamu alaikum, everybody. Thank you, Bülent, for giving the intro. And I want to really take a few words to thank IBA and particularly the CE for conducting this, and it's really important. And a round of thanks to Dr. Junaid for sharing the history. And if you heard the facts that he shared on the journey of how from 12 to over 200, and particularly of interest to me where he said how many subsidiaries and trusts there are in the SOEs. So, Bülent, I'd like to share with the panel of a more broader strategic thought process of why SOE. If you put on a business hat and you raise investment and you have shareholders, whether you're an entrepreneur or a large corporate public sector, why do you have an organization and what is the mandate? And you've shared a very good example, Bulent, of OECD and a World Bank document. So starting with that, I don't see any reflection in the act that was sent of efficiencies, right? It has no chapter referring to KPIs of the existing 200 plus, right? So that's one huge component that's missing, right? It doesn't talk about, it talks about a monitoring cell and will be Ministry of Finance, mein, jahan har cheez hoti hai, right? So having a monitoring cell on in the Ministry of Finance, where an additional secretary is already looking after this, that defeats the purpose anyway. But our level of thinking should go at a strategic level now, because Pakistan is in a severe financial constraint. So the strategic objective of a SOE should be, how does it add value to the GDP of the country? As simple as that, right? Whether it's a trust, whether it's a totally commercial. Universities, I think Dr. Junaid mentioned, they're 33. So the information we have from HSC, it's a 60-40 split of 220 universities, public sector versus private sector. So that would be more than 33.
I would add that the universities have been excluded from the ambit unless they've been specifically scheduled. But for now, they've been excluded. All healthcare and all universities.
There are two that are act of parliaments. One is ComSats and the other is NUST. They're reported in the Ministry of Science and Technology, interestingly, which has 17 of the other adaras reporting into it. So my thought process is really to look at Asia Pac, right, where Singapore started the transformation of SOEs, and the head of legal of SECP said that they engaged consultants in this exercise. So one recommendation right off the bat is, why aren't we studying what's happening globally as best practices, right? And the answer you typically get from the civil bureaucracy or even the military bureaucracy that control all the SOEs is, we know better for Pakistan. Well, your IMF deal indicates that. So that answer is not something that should be considered seriously anymore, that we know better, right? Look at other countries, China, right? And we've seen the growth in the last 30 years. We've seen 900 million people come out of poverty, sent their bureaucracy for lateral entry training to Singapore, right? They pulled back Silicon Valley executives, did lateral entry into the bureaucracy in state-owned enterprises, right? So you may wonder why I'm stressing on efficiencies, no matter what documents we have, because I've not just been in the government prior to the SSGA, I've been with a think tank and part of 10 years in a government well, they say fully autonomous, but really they're never autonomous. I've been advisor to NUS where we went through a transformation, right? And it was an academic, corporate, and of course, government triple helix exercise that we went to. How do we get knowledge capital into the country, right? So first and foremost, study examples where this has worked. Pakistan does not attract the best intellectual capital in the world. And we first need to admit that. Once you get that, you can write documents as the SOC. So, sorry, Bulent, I don't know if Muzaffar is here, but I've gone through this document and highlighted in yellow where I don't know who put this together, to be quite honest. It's an attempt that's been made with Miftah's, the former finance minister's end comment. And it looked like it was just done out of haste, to be quite honest, right? Because the SOEs are your majority issue of your government debt trap right now. And why do I say that? It's not just a double whammy. One, the losses, I think, and someone would probably allude to the fact that it's about $1.5 trillion. So we're trying to raise revenues for the country via FBR, and no one's talked about reforms in the SOEs to cut the cost base of the ones that are bleeding every month. I don't see Pakistan Ordnance Factories here, for example. What do they really do? There's many that are not on the list that Dr. Junaid even shared. right? They own lands, they own assets. State life, for example, just to give you an idea, while we were doing STZA, and special technology zones globally have flourished. They've really helped the economy. So we said, instead of building new infra where the government does not need to spend money, we found out that the state life has buildings that are empty. Karachi, Lahore, Peshawar, Islamabad. In fact, the STZ head office is in a state life building right now. So your loss goes much beyond 1.5 trillion. And the reason why is you're taking loan money, foreign money, you're converting into dollars at a rate of decades ago. You're paying back at the rate today. So that's one. Loan money going into state-owned enterprises. Their own balance sheets are in losses, the majority, right? Very few are making high profits. And when I say high profits, you're a country of 230 million. Let's start looking at Fortune 500 now and Fortune 1000, where even smaller countries than us have companies there. We're not there. And Fortune, why that's important? Because it shows a potential of a state-owned organized revenue and hence profitability, right? So I think Pakistan PSO may be the highest in terms of revenue, but it still doesn't make the Fortune 500. That's very interesting, where smaller countries, SOEs, are on the Fortune 500. That's tied into how they run. Now, how they're run, they're monopolized by both bureaucracies, civil and military, until that's not addressed in the document that was sent to us, right? Why I'm so passionate about this, because until an umbrella of strategic reforms are not done, then your state-owned enterprises can have laws, regulations, but the professionals they need to attract, the investment they need to attract, the enabling environment created to help the GDP of the country, these things will not be possible if an entire reforms in the SOEs are not done themselves. Some just need to be shut down. Some need total reforms. Some need new manpower, right? The answer of how you have a board of directors and how it's selected, it's silly because no one follows the existing law. Who's going to follow the new one, right? So I think I can go on, and at the end, I want to hear everyone else to share why this is. I'd probably categorize, if you look at reforms needed in the country, whether electoral reforms, judicial reforms, police reforms, educational reforms, SOEs, I'd probably mark between top 5 or even in the top 10. And that's how critical this subject is. So thank you for the floor. I will be sharing my thoughts in more detail as the discussion progresses. I'll give it back to the floor, Bulent.
Pardon me. Many thanks, Amir Hashmi Saab. I think you've touched upon a lot of issues, and you've emphasized the fact that the implementation of this law will actually be a Herculean task. It'll require a lot of sincerity and hard work amongst the various government divisions, regulatory bodies, and stakeholders. And accordingly, I'll ask Dr. Junaid, couple of questions. The first is there a real resolve within the executive to undertake such an effort? And secondly, if you think there is resolve, what practical steps must be taken to ensure that a workable framework for the successful implementation of SOE reforms is carried out? Like Amir Hasmi Saab said, the KPIs need to develop around these various SOEs. It's a very, very detailed exercise that is required. Would you please comment on this?
Mute. He's on mute.
Sir, आप म्यूट पे हैं, डॉक्टर जुनैद साहब. You are on mute, Dr. Saab.
Mute. Okay, fine. Right. Thank you. I thought Yamuna was controlling this mute, non-mute thing. Anyway, what I'm saying is that I've had direct dealing and personal involvement with a couple of ministries One is the Ministry of Industries and Production, which runs all the manufacturing companies and engineering units, etc. It is unbelievable as to how the whole ministry and how these organizations are run. In fact, there is a section officer, or at best a deputy secretary, who is running the show. The Ministry of Industries and Production, in the last 8 years, no secretary has lasted for more than a year. They come in and they're there for 6 months or 8 months, and they would like to move on because Ministry of Production is not a very productive ministry. And they move on to some other ministry which is more productive in their own opinion. And the management and the overall operation and oversight is then left to a deputy secretary or maximum joint secretary at best. I have seen managing directors sitting with the section officers and with the deputy secretaries trying to get things approved by the controlling ministry. Because it is the controlling ministry who also appoints the managing director and the chief executive of these SOEs that they are, which they control. And for the last, I think, 5-6 years, the Prime Minister of Pakistan has actually been appointing each chief executive, each managing director is being appointed by the Prime Minister himself. Now, as a consequence, the role of the principal accounting officer, which is the secretary of the ministry, is become very critical. And all decision making in all these units have to go back to the ministry and to the secretary, where the secretary then decides whether a decision on a particular subject is to be taken or not. Now, that is the power base. And of course, some of these units are very lucrative as well. And these government officials are able to take substantial benefits from this. It is not that they make assets out of them, but it is using their facilities, using their cars and air travel and such type of small favors which are constantly. Now, having said all of this thing, my own impression is that the government of Pakistan and its controlling and its ministries will have a very difficult time to get this thing implemented. I have attempted to make business plans for 10 different organizations, and the business plans were also approved by their respective secretaries and by their respective ministries as well. But then these business plans were not implemented at the level of the SOE because the managing director in the meanwhile was changed, and a new managing director came in who didn't understand and who did not take an ownership. So this kind of situation is there. So I believe that there are some people who have pushed for it, but unless and until the government, which is the Prime Minister and the Cabinet, were to take this matter very seriously, not much is going to happen. इसमें एक चीज जो बात मैंने अभी आमिर हाशमी साहब कह रहे थे, एक बहुत बड़ा सेक्टर है जो कि मिलिट्री और डिफेंस का है. Defense Production Division itself controls some very large organizations, and I have exposure to them. And not only that, there's also the Fauji Foundation and the Army Welfare Trust and the Shine Foundation and the Barrier Foundation, etc. अगर आप इन सबको मिला लें तो ये भी कोई 212 से ज़्यादा यूनिट तो ये भी होंगे. And these are also behemoth, huge organizations. And you may recall a book by Aisha Siddiqa about Military Inc. I'm quite familiar with Fauji Foundation, and I have advised them and worked with them also in the past. Recently, in the last 2 years, they have closed down 13 units. And all these 13 units are making a hell of a lot of losses. But there are still more to happen. But that particular side has not been looked at all. So I think a law is coming into force, but unless and until the Prime Minister, the entire cabinet is fully behind it, and they bring about necessary changes in the bureaucracy, SOEs Act will not get implemented in any way seriously. That's what I'm not a pessimist, but I think, because I've seen this happening in the last 40 years so many times, that I'm now sharing my
Thank you,
experience
sir.
and
We
my thought
appreciate
process. Thank you.
your sincere appraisement of the issues. Um, we've now, discussed the introduction, and now we'll get down to the specifics of the act. Our next session is about measurable performance, and I'd like to invite Mr. Zafar Khan to draw on his extensive experience in public, private, and philanthropic sectors to discuss the practical challenges that the various SOE boards and management will face after the promulgation and implementation of this act. Zafar Khan sir, please.
Okay, Ji, thank you very much. Just briefly, by way of introduction, I mean, I'd just like to say that as I was listening in, I just mentally did a count of how many state enterprise boards I've had the privilege or the honor to serve on, and it ends up being like 12. I'm sure there are one or two I've still forgotten, and some of them are very significant entities of Pakistan. So yes, I've had some first-hand experience working in these state enterprises, and so obviously then I have views. Uh, Basically, ji, dekhiye, we are now focusing in on performance measurement. That's the specific. So rather than go into generalities, I don't want to get into philosophy because then, I'll go out of the ambit of the law, which is our primary focus today. So measurable performance pe agar main focus karta hun, dekhiye, having a business plan with some clear deliverables made on a regular basis, made on a timely basis, etc. All of that I wholly endorse and wholly support. Uske baghair to kaam nahi chal sakta. Now, the problem is कि ये plans बनेंगे कैसे, इसकी mechanism क्या है, how practical is it, and who are the players who kind of will go about making this. So when I look at that, I have concerns. Like Dr. Junaid said, law में तो आप लिख लेंगे जो कुछ भी है, but practically उसकी execution और implementation कैसे होगी, and who will do it? देखिए, one fundamental design in this whole underlying design is that there should be a very good balance in the law, the act, between your authority and responsibility. Let me repeat, a good balance between authority and responsibility. What tends to happen in the state enterprises, from my experiences, authority लेने के लिए तो बहुत सारे बाबू लोग इकट्ठे हो जाते हैं, and they all think, they're cat's whiskers, they know everything, और उनकी जो बात है वो करनी है because we are the primary shareholder. मगर responsibility जो है वो उसके साथ है नहीं. So as a consequence, होता ये है कि जो boards आपके होते हैं, even with good intentions you constitute these boards, they actually, you disempower them because their decisions are quite often second guessed, and or they are overridden by the ministry. Decisions are therefore then not always being made in the boardroom. And after a while, people who are independent directors and so on and so forth, they say, yeah, what the hell is going on here? Meri zimmedari bhi hai, and yet, the processes that are being followed don't follow the good norms of corporate governance, where issues need to be discussed in the boards and decisions should be made in the board, and people who are making the decisions, are duly constituted and proper. And just very briefly again, जैसे जुनैद साहब ने कहा, and I agree with it, इतनी changes होती हैं ministries में. अच्छा, and then वो फिर delegate कर देते हैं because then the top man is really not that tuned in, and then it goes down to the lower levels, फिर वो decision making वहाँ पे आ जाती है. Meetings के अंदर they actually send their chotas to those meetings. They're way below the level specified. Who then come and give their own narrow parochial view, and then they say, you ask a question or two, they say, let us get back, हम check करके वापस आके आपको बताएंगे. तो ये तो इस तरह से तो फिर ये you are busting the governance system. But anyway, Plans I wholly endorse, बनने चाहिए, systematically बनने चाहिए. I think a few points that we need to look at carefully is, देखिए, if you are a listed company, state enterprise, आपके minority shareholders भी हैं, ठीक है. सो आपकी जो इंफॉर्मेशन शेयरिंग आप करते हो, जनरली अ गुड प्रिंसिपल ऑफ गवर्नेंस इज कि आप सारे शेयर होल्डर्स को इन्फॉर्म रखते हैं, उनका व्यू उसमें आता है, एंड सो ऑन सो फोर्थ. तो ये जरा इस डिजाइन में देखना पड़ेगा कि हम वो जो माइनॉरिटी शेयर होल्डर्स हैं उनको तो कहीं अलग नहीं रख रहे. वी आर जस्ट कंसर्न्ड अबाउट द प्राइमरी शेयर होल्डर, उसका क्या इंटरेस्ट है और वो क्या करे. If it's a wholly owned enterprise, then obviously this issue is not so serious. But if there are minority shareholders, then we need to look at. The process that has been outlined on how these plans are to be developed, I think it's going to be difficult to work with them. आप पहले मिनिस्ट्री से कंसल्टेशन करेंगे, फिर कोई ड्राफ्ट आप, अकॉर्डिंग टू व्हाट आई रेड, submit a draft to a central monitoring unit. भाई ये कौन है ये central monitoring unit वाले, इनका क्या रोल है, will they say ये nay to some of these things. उसके बाद फिर जो प्लान अडॉप्ट होगा वो फेडरल गवर्नमेंट के पास जाएगा. So it's a longish process. And अगर सब्सिडरीज हैं तो उनका भी आप इसमें शामिल करें. सब्सिडी, इसका मतलब ये है कि जब आपको ये प्लानिंग साइकिल आप शुरू करेंगे, ये आपको बहुत जल्दी स्टार्ट लेना पड़ेगा वर्सेस द नॉर्म, बिकॉज सब्सिडरीज को भी तो अपने प्लान्स बनाने होंगे ना, जो आपने ओके करने हैं, एंड देन यू विल कंसोलिडेट इट एंड सेंड टू द गवर्नमेंट एज पर दिस थिंग. So there'll be quite a few things that will happen in series and not in parallel, and that will take a lot of time. And हम तो एक्सपीरियंस ये है कि barely स्टार्ट ऑफ द ईयर पे वो प्लान मुकम्मल होता है, बल्कि कई दफा तो प्लान जो है वो साल शुरू भी हो जाता है, अभी प्लान अप्रूव नहीं हुआ होता. सो ये जरा से प्रैक्टिकल डिफिकल्टीज भी आएंगे, दैट विल नीड टू बी स्ट्रीमलाइंड सो दैट द प्लानिंग प्रोसेस इज स्मूथ एंड यू नो इट्स नॉट, it doesn't involve too many steps. देखें, अगर तो जब आपकी मिनिस्ट्री ने नॉमिनेट करके लोग बोर्ड पे रखे हैं एक्स ऑफिशियोज, जो उनके रिप्रेजेंटेटिव आते, उधर ही रिव्यू होना चाहिए ना कि गवर्नमेंट का पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू क्या है, प्राइमरी इन दिस केस प्राइमरी शेयर होल्डर का क्या व्यू पॉइंट है, एंड वहीं पे उसको डिबेट करके, थ्रैश करके, एक्स्ट्रा उसको कोई स्टडी करना है करके उसको क्लोज आउट करें. मगर आप बोर्ड से बाहर लेके जाओगे, देन यू विल सेंड टू ऑल दीज वेरियस एंटिटीज, वो देखेंगे, वो अपने 2 pennies डालेंगे, फिर वो वापस आएगा, फिर बोर्ड से अप्रूव होगा. जरा मुझे तो लगता है थोड़ी खिचड़ी पक जाएगी इसमें, एंड उसमें फिर ये ना, यू रन द रिस्क ऑफ ड्रॉपिंग द बॉल. ये नहीं होना चाहिए. शेयर होल्डर का डेफिनेटली अपना रोल है, प्राइमरी शेयर होल्डर का उसको उसका वजन होना चाहिए, उसका से होना चाहिए, और वो से इस तरह आता है ना कि उसके बंदे हैं सारे बोर्ड पे, इंडिपेंडेंट डायरेक्टर्स भी वो लगाएगा, उसके अपने एक्स ऑफिशियल्स भी होंगे. भाई आप चुन के सही लोगों को वहां लगाओ, देन अलाउ द बोर्ड, गिव इट फ्रीडम एंड इंडिपेंडेंस टू डू व्हाट इट नीड्स टू डू टू डिलीवर ऑन द प्लान्स. But if you're going to second guess the board all along and have these multiple reviews, तो ये मामला फिर गड़बड़ हो जाता है. देखें, एक और छोटा पॉइंट, एंड आई डोंट वांट टू टेक मोर टाइम. यू नो, आई एम एक्चुअली अ प्राइवेट सेक्टर पर्सन, और मुझे एक चीज जो व्हेन आई यूज्ड टू रिफ्लेक्ट ऑन दिस, जो मुझे नजर आती है कि प्राइवेट सेक्टर में बोर्ड लेवल्स पे और डिसीजन मेकिंग में ट्रस्ट फैक्टर इज मच मोर देन इन द गवर्नमेंट. गवर्नमेंट में नोबडी ट्रस्ट नोबडी, यू नो, इतने आपके चेक्स और ऑडिट्स, एंड अभी एक आपका स्टैट्यूटरी ऑडिट होगा फर्ग्यूसन्स का या केपीएमजी या समबडी लाइक दैट, फिर एजीपी वो ऑडिटर जनरल आएगा, वो अपने लगाएगा, उनको ये तमीज भी नहीं है कि यार ये बिजनेस डिसीजन को आप कैसे चैलेंज कर रहे हो. यू नो, अगर कोई रूल प्रोसीजर वायलेट हुआ है तो वो तो ऑडिट का काम है. वो जैसे मैं पीआई में था, मुझसे कहा ये इंजन्स कैसे बेच दिए आप लोगों ने, ये किसकी अथॉरिटी थी इंजन बेचने की, आपने कैसे बेची इंजन. मैंने कहा ये इससे आपका क्या ताल्लुक है, मैंने बेचे या नहीं बेचे, हालांकि मैंने नहीं बेचे थे, मेरे प्रीडेसेसर ने बेचे थे. बट यू नो, तो ये फिर सारा फिर होता क्या है कि लोग फिर फैसले नहीं करते. दे वांट टू देन कवर देमसेल्व्स बिकॉज दे आर सेइंग यार ये तो बात चलेगी, फिर बाद में वो नैप के लेटर्स आ गए, ये आ गया, वो आ गया. सो परफॉर्मेंस मैनेजमेंट होनी चाहिए. लॉ में एक अटेम्प्ट की गई है कि ये पैरामीटर जो डालें, that I wholeheartedly support. But I have concerns about the process that's been outlined, and I have some concerns whether the boards will be truly empowered and then held accountable to deliver on those. You are on mute, Buland. You're on mute.
Zafar Saab, bade pointed, powerful issues. So I would ask Abdul Rahim Surya Saab to react to Zafar Khan Saab's points, especially in respect to the scheme of the act now is more government, whereas the conventional the logic is that there should be less government involvement, let the boards do what they are required to do. But it seems like there's more and more government involvements and multiple layers of red tapeism. Could you, Surya Saab, please respond to that?
I cannot react to the Zafar Saab statement. He is a ustad and a very senior professional. I want to add what he said, that empower the board. Because if you keep on asking everything, then the whole year will go and you will not be able to complete the business plan. If you see theoretically, it's very good that you have to write something. The first step is to write, then second step is implementation, right? If you see the content of business plan, in the last para, in the para 4, it says, demonstrate how SOE will achieve its primary objective. So that check and balance is built in within the business plan, that they expect SOE to tell how they will achieve. It's a good thing. The contents are very good because the business plan is to be made for 3 years. It should include operation, strategic direction as well, and also financial and non-financial performance, and then demonstrate how SOE will achieve this objective. So I 100% agree with him that as you know that the composition include around 50% or plus independent director, ex officio, and one CEO. It interestingly does not include more than one executive director, whereas in public sector or corporate governance rules, there is a requirement of 1/3 executive director. In bank, there is a requirement of 2 executive director, but here the size of executive director is limited to only 1 in shape of CEO. So when already all the people are from government side, so why to keep on pushing the ball here and there? So I 100% agree with you. And the plus one more thing which is in this section is the statement of corporate intent. And the good thing the government has done by drafting it, they've included its contents also. Sometimes they ask for something, but they don't write the contents. I'll give the example that in Companies Act, corporate governance rules, you will not find anywhere the contents of the annual report. But this act luckily also include the contents of the annual report as well. So it's a good thing that they have prescribed a rule. And in our ICAP and ICMP joint committee, we may also consider this as a part of disclosure for even the private sector, so that they should also publish if possible. If nothing is confidentially leaked, they may also come up and publish the business plan and statement of corporate intent. So these are the good steps, and I agree with him. Practical difficulties are there, which we face in all steps of our life.
Thank you so much. I think next panel में भी आप लोग हैं, Zafar Saab and Surya Saab. I'd like you to stay with this thought process, and we can continue this discussion in the next panel with respect to responsible management. Right now, I would like to invite Javed Iqbal Saab, who's Chief Commercial Officer of Special Technology Zones Authority. Prior to his short career as a technocrat, he's led a transformative role in the digital economy in the country. He's played a very powerful role dealing with many corporations, SOEs, assisting them digitize and understand the value of their data. So keeping this in mind, Javed Saab, what benefits of digitization by SOEs do you think, and what they are, and how will appropriate digitization of SOEs improve their performance?
Thank you, Balan Saab. Appreciate the invite and congratulations to IB on running this this stellar program. I think it's high time or even beyond time that we sort of take a holistic look at improving all the SOEs and beyond. On the digitization front, Balan Saab, digitization is a given now. And if any SOE in 2023 has not conceptualized and put it in some sort of action, I believe they're already very late. The ROI in this sense is not a return on investment. It's increasingly the risk of ignoring it, as I'd like to tell all my clients as well, and as well as the stakeholders as well. But digitization is not about just putting in the new software, putting in a new ERP or make a new website or making your social media better. I think it's about realigning the vision of an organization, leveraging a tech mindset, where the understanding that anything and everything that the organization does automates and maps to a centralized theme where data is collected. And that data is then leveraged to not only make the organization's performance better, but also improve not only the stakeholder, but shareholder performance as well in that case as well. Customer satisfaction is increased this way. Data-driven insights come in as well. In fact, the purpose of this law is also to define the role of federal government as a stakeholder with a view to enable an effective discharge of its obligations. And one of the things that is introduced here is the transparency of operations through establishing a centralized database of information pertaining to the SOEs to support this data-driven policy. Now, a lot of this is a mouthful and a handful to understand, but a data-driven policy not only constructs on how and what data becomes important for the measurability of this organization and beyond, but also how the evolution of not only one organization in the SOE realm, but all of them collectively as government entities evolve and grow as well. And I think we have to start thinking beyond an individualistic mindset and go holistic on how not only the vision, but the processes of each of these, how archaic are they? Some of these SOPs were written back 30 years ago when the rules of business were very different as well. When the 1973 rules of business were very new. We have to start thinking how new laws are promulgated as well. And even from a governance perspective, I remember going through a course, the director's training at PICG, and having a constructive dialogue around how governance is still looked at within the confines of accounting and legalities rather than the technicality of things as well. So if we have to take any shot at limiting human error that Zafar Saab just talked about being on 12 boards as well, and a lot of people asking questions outside their domains because those domains are not clearly defined through data. Those visions have evolved. Agility has improved as well. Employee excellence has quantifiably moved up as well. And communication tools vis-a-vis the data have also evolved as well. We're all citizens of WhatsApp now, where it's very detrimental to the growth of an organization where all the communications around a central enterprise are being done outside the domain of the organization as well. So a holistic look that talks not just about the vision, it maps the people and culture aspect, it maps the processes aspect, and finally, holistically takes a look at the tools and technologies that are available. And the last point on this is technology has taken a center seat in this digitization realm as well, whereas previously it was just a support arm. Now the entire prowess of the organization is built upon it. So a relook at what was dug in, what were the basic foundations of the technology architectures that were put in back in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, and are the futuristic infrastructures of these organizations vis-a-vis their focus areas, do these technological foundations that were put in back then even allow those increases, bandwidths, infrastructures, applications, security of each of these enterprises as well? A lot to look at, a lot to consider. And once that's sort of thought through, I think it completely puts automation at the center stage. It increases transparency and improves efficiency and performance as well. So I'm excited that this was added as an agenda and we're taking this forward. Appreciate the time.
Thank you. No, this is extremely valuable input. So you would then recommend that when the federal government gets down to actually making a plan or KPI, just say Amir Hashmi said, the technological infrastructure should be at the forefront before they do anything else.
Absolutely. So technological infrastructure with a new vision in mind. And infrastructure is looked at in two different ways. And Amir Hashmi Saab, who led the formation of the SSGA Act with a vision that Pakistan does not have the right infrastructure around technology. So that needs to be built as well to formulate ecosystems of knowledge. And then we don't bring in all the different stakeholders together, like Amir Saab mentioned, the triple helix model that connects academia, industry, and government together into a cohesive ecosystem to take these organizations forward. And the output, Buland Saab, is not only for the increase in efficiency of these organizations internally, it is to their stakeholders externally within the country, and also, taking today's reality in mind, more importantly, be part of our global economy as well in terms of exports and everything else too, because information technology is no longer information technology as a vertical. It's technology now as a horizontal, embedded, enabled, promulgated into the entire ambit of business going forward. So hoping that people get it now.
Thank you. So I would just segue into your next question. I mean, it makes appropriate sense to raise it here. You're a senior officer and a member of the STZA. And as you're aware, the STZA Act gives the authority the mandate to formulate, to advise the federal government on policies in the tech sector, and includes economic, fiscal, and trade policies. I think the SOE Act falls squarely within the ambit in which STZA can provide advice to the federal government. What potential role can STZA play in this regard?
Well, Buland Saab, if we think about it, the triple helix model that I sort of talked about and Amir Saab introduced in the beginning of the call as well, it builds that knowledge-enabled ecosystem that didn't exist in Pakistan before. We are at the precipice of the third and fourth industrial revolution. Now, interestingly, while bulk of the developed world is building the rails of the fourth industrial revolution, in Pakistan and much of the developing world, a lot of these are being built together. So we don't have the foundational elements vis-a-vis not just the infrastructure, but also the policies, and more importantly, the mindset that sort of mandates and takes this forward as well. We're still stuck on whether Pakistan can export another few $1 billion. We're not thinking holistically in terms of looking at the ambit of how technology has leapfrogged. We've got 5G coming in the realm as well. How each of the factors of broadband productivity, of all the policy elements, of all the various aspects of startup ecosystems, of the enablement of technology, not just on the software side, but also on the hardware side. So mobile manufacturing, cloud, data centers, etc. All of these become the foundational element of growth in our country have missed the boat. We have not upped our skill levels that way. We had a meeting with the National Technology Council at HEC yesterday, and we talked about how we need to map the 49 technologies that are in the STZA Act that Amir Saab led, and understand how HEC, as our holistic enabler of skill set, is mapping the human mind tech skill set element to that as well. So all the potential enterprises that are going to be housed in these zones, inshallah, in the coming years, will need the 130 million youth bulge to participate in those economic activity as well. Are they ready? Do we have the right curricula that is to these global standards? We've done good strides on the freelance side, but holistically, a lot of the mapping of each of these areas where some pockets of excellence do exist is missing. So STZA, being a very reformist type of an act, it's a brilliant act. I encourage people on this call to do a study on it as well. It was built in consultation with external, internal stakeholders, government and non-government entities, and global technology experts from Silicon Valley and Europe and Asia, et cetera, as well, into an understanding that if we reimagine Pakistan as a tech economy, which not only focuses on exporting it, but also putting, without a lot of water, power, gas infrastructure, this area of focus can put us at a very fast rate, on a very fast track to not only increase the efficiency and productivity of our state-owned enterprises, of our industry as a whole, but also, moving it forward to the larger sense as well. So I'm excited that we're at least talking about it and taking it forward. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
For the opportunity.
Zafar Saab, let's get back to the hardcore responsibilities of the board. Chapter 5 relates to responsible management. And like you mentioned earlier, there's so many different bureaucratic offices and ministries and divisions which are now responsible. For instance, with the board nomination committee, I'm confused. I thought there was already a pool of independent directors available. PICG maintains them. All the best minds are there. Why would this chapter introduce a new way of identifying independent directors when already an exercise has been done and they exist? So would you comment on the strengths and drawbacks of the responsible management chapter? Sir, you're on mute, sorry.
Yes, sorry. See, I mean, the fact that we've got a list of independent directors who've gone through this program is useful and good to know it is there. However, the main point really, when I think of the fundamental, here is the government primary shareholder of this enterprise. It absolutely has the right to appoint people that it is comfortable with on these boards. ये एक बेसिक डिजाइन है जिसमें आप उसको वो नहीं कर सकते. So the concerned ministry have to answer questions on the performance of that entity in the parliament, here, there, to the public, etc. So they have the right to appoint. And I think I was quite okay with this idea of having a nomination committee headed by the concerned minister, his secretary, and reps from the finance. Is no problem with that. I was just wondering whether or not they should also have considered including the chair of the board as a member of this committee, mainly because they can, and on a board, you just don't need skill sets, but you need a balanced skill set. You need some diversity of experience. All of those factors have to be bunched in. Now, the concerned minister or the secretary would not have that knowledge. What is the board? What are the kind of challenges that the board is facing, and what skill sets are required? So a well-constituted nomination committee with some representation from the board, i.e. the chairman of the board, I think would be desirable to do this. So this is step one. Uske baad ye hai ki, it says that they will then make recommendations. Now, I'm not clear who are they recommending to. The nomination committee, who is it recommending to? Is it that they will do, it's a high-powered committee, bhai, ministers hai, secretary hai, vagara, vagara. So they will then go what, to the prime minister to get his approval? If that is the design, my question is, what value add does the prime minister do? Seriously, where does he get the knowledge कि Pakistan International Airline के board पे किसको रखना है या किसको नहीं रखना है? Where does he even have the time to address the hundreds of nominations that will take place? So it's just another bureaucratic step. It delays things and it opens it up for influence peddling and lobbying to get certain people into certain positions. So my primary comment is, nomination committee, good idea. Include in there the chair of the board to the extent possible to get, or at least get inputs कि किस किस्म के लोग चाहिए for the board, and these people should then directly appoint. That's my recommendation. As far as the chair is concerned, chair of the board, it says somewhere कि वो chair of the board वो appoint करेंगे. मेरे ख्याल में that's bad language. They should nominate and let the board approve the chair. That's how it is normally done in good governance. And because they have so many votes and seats on the board, वो खुद ब खुद हो जाएगा. But आप nominate करें the chair of the board. उसके बाद मैंने देखा कि उसमें उन्होंने they want to resort also to advertisements to find these independent directors and so on. I frankly don't like that idea very much, because they'll advertise it, they'll get a lot of kachra, they'll get hundreds of applications, और फिर उसको sift through करना and so on, फिर उस पे litigation हो सकती है वगैरह वगैरह. So that doesn't enthuse me. The idea of using a headhunter for some suggestions is okay. That's more manageable and controllable. Using the certified list of independent directors is a good idea. They can pick some names from there and then interview and select and so on. तो ये सारी चीजें ठीक है. एक और important चीज इसमें जो मैं कहना चाहूँगा कि इसमें आप time limits भी रखें. I'm from experience, I'm telling you कि board पे position खाली हो जाती है. The Code of Corporate Governance will say 60 days or 90 days में आप appoint कर दें vacancy को. इधर तो साल गुजर जाएगा, नहीं करेंगे. क्यों जी, प्राइम मिनिस्टर के पास फाइल गई हुई है, वो अप्रूव करेगा तो आएगा. So these are the bureaucratic steps that are quite unnecessary. उसको आप simplify करें और आप time limit पे insist करें कि जो है appointment जो है वो vacant जब होएगी तो the government will fulfill those in a very short period of time. उसके बाद I think otherwise it's mostly fine. The nomination committee, again, I'll just sum it up by saying the most important influence that the primary shareholder, the government, can have on the board is by appointing good people on the board. Once they have done that, they fulfilled an important responsibility. फिर आप उनको इजाजत दें to perform. And once a year, जैसे कि होता है listed companies का, get the board to present to the primary shareholder, all shareholders. वो जैसे AGM होती है, उसमें you hold the board responsible and accountable for what they have done. And then if you are not happy, the next time around, kick them out and bring some new people in. ये process आप follow करें ना. So that would be my quick thoughts and reaction to this segment.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Ms. Nosheen Ahmed, I would invite you to comment on the chapter on prudent and efficient management. What does it mean? Do you think this definition is sufficient? Also, please weigh in your experiences in this regard. Love to hear from you.
Okay, thank you, Bulant, and I think it's been really interesting listening to everybody. And of course, the subtext in what everybody is saying is that really it's not about the words, but it's more about how practically this whole thing is going to pan out and how it's going to be implemented. And that's where most of us have our reservations and our concerns. Now, chapter 3 is the chapter which deals with prudent and efficient management. And I read this chapter very much in conjunction with the public sector rules of 2013, which I would say is actually a very well drafted set of rules in terms of laying down the responsibilities of the board, etc. Now, prudent and efficient management under chapter 3, there are a lot of words there. There's integrity, objectivity, due diligence, due care, having people on the board who have the right professional skills, as Zafar Khan Saab said, that diversity of experience, the sort of skills that you need to run the business. And then it lays down a fit and proper test criteria for the board members and for the chief executive, which existed prior to this also in the public sector rules. It's also talking about having a proper organogram structure and sufficient staffing for the state, SOE, and keeping good accounting records. So there's nothing in there that one can really object to. And in fact, it goes on to talk about certain principles, which to me are very much, I feel very encouraged when I read those principles. And it's saying that prudent and efficient management will also mean that when you're preparing your business plan, you will consider the economic consequences of your long-term decisions. You will foster business relationships with your suppliers, customers, and other stakeholders. You will consider the impact of your decisions and your business on community and environment. And you will have a code of conduct, and you will follow, you will keep an eye on the reputation of your organization and follow high standards of business conduct. And again, if we think about the minority shareholders, it says you will act fairly with regard to the different stakeholders and shareholders of that state-owned enterprise. So really, chapter 3 gives a very holistic definition of corporate governance principles as we now understand them. Because if you take Sir Adrian Cadbury's definition, and he's considered to be quite the guru, the ustad of corporate governance in the UK and in other countries, he is talking about stakeholders, not just shareholders. And he is talking about having a balance between your objectives of profitability and your social and economic objectives, and being part of this whole economic and social ecosystem of the nation. I think I'm very encouraged that this has actually been put down in writing in this act. My question then is that you are to apply these principles to your business plan. Then some of the principles that the other speakers were talking about, Amir, Saab, Junaid, about efficiency, about cutting costs, about reducing manpower, because we know that these SOEs are terribly overstaffed. Really, then, what this principle of prudent and efficient management means is that you have to look at all of that. And are we really going to do that?
Thank you. So in the same vein, I mean, do you think that the board's responsibilities, powers, and functions in the next chapter are also sufficiently addressed in this law? Very briefly, madam, if you can.
So very quickly, it says very clearly the boards are going to be autonomous. And the ministries are not going to be giving them instructions. But I want to read that alongside chapter 8, which talks about responsibilities to the shareholders, and say that, yes, the boards should be autonomous. But our issue here is, and I'll draw upon two of my own personal examples with the First Women's Bank and as a member of the Pay and Pension Commission, that, you know, what is happening, what we see with the government is that, of course, they're taking a lot of flack because none of these state-owned enterprises, or most of these state-owned enterprises, do not make money. They're a drain on the exchequer, as Dr. Junaid pointed out. So what do we do about it? They do believe that miraculously, if we put these really smart, intelligent, private sector, expert type independent directors on the board, that is the panacea to all our issues. So on the First Women's Bank board, what happened was that initially the commercial banks did have shareholding. And as the requirement for recapitalization came in, the government became almost 80 plus, and the other commercial banks did not put extra capital in. So now the government appointed a lot of really good independent directors on the board. And they said to the commercial banks, even though your shareholding does not merit it, you can put some bankers on the board because we believe that you can add value. So here we were, a very well-intentioned board, majority, so not even 50%, majority independent directors. The two people who were not independent directors was one person from the Ministry of Finance and one person who was the president of the bank.
Okay.
Every time we wanted to make a meaningful decision. Now, this person who was from the Ministry of Finance was a junior person. She did not have access to her boss or her boss's boss. So every time we made a decision, it went back to the Ministry of Finance and it got shot down. So, you know, these principles of you will have full autonomy. And I totally agree that the shareholder information and shareholder consent is important. But then, you know, if you want to take ownership, either you give those boards that independence or then you put your people on the board. Because your independent directors cannot be standing in line paying their own money to go to Islamabad to meet the finance minister.
Thank you
so
so
how
much.
to work in practice?
Yeah, that's a problem from your experience that you've identified, and Zafar Saab has also clearly mentioned it. Ms. Tara Uzra, are you there? Ask you to unmute, please. And show yourself. Thank you. So you have very boldly and bravely represented, the female interest on many boards of SOEs. Often, I think you're the sole female member on the board. You've seen how in other jurisdictions such as the EU and Australia, etc., they're encouraging more and more female directors to participate on the boards of listed companies and SOEs. I'm quite shocked to see this law. It's a recent manifestation of corporate governance, that no improvement has been made in this regard. A very serious issue, in my opinion, nationally and internationally.
So absolutely, it's important to have gender representation as well as independent director representation, not only because it's important for a country, but it's also important for the stakeholders of a company. Companies that have more diversity and inclusion tend to have better performance. So even from a stakeholder point of view, it is something that is a very wise practice. I have served on boards such as Let's Go. I'm currently Dawah Family Takafa Limited, PSO and PRL, and I have been officially the female independent director on those boards. But in PSO for a year or so, we had two female directors, one representing the Ministry of Petroleum. So, and it worked very, very well because it wasn't due to any mandates. It was just two very qualified people serving on the board who are incredibly supportive of one another as well. And so while legally, and I know, Bulent, you're both a lawyer as well as an advocate for good corporate governance as well as for gender equality, it is aspirational and certainly a wise decision to increase the number of required women according to the law in line with best global practices. The reality is when these laws were introduced in Pakistan, many companies on PSX did not actually comply. First, there was the thing that the 3-year term would end. And then when the 3-year term ended, then they would have a vote, which would include a female. They wouldn't call an election in the middle. So that delayed the process. And then some companies, I believe, even asked for extensions or abilities to have a bit more time for compliance. And that was for the one mandatory position. So I think the regulators felt that a little time was needed first to make this shift to one position before asking for more. Now, the population of Pakistan is 49% female. Many of the boards also have not only as stakeholders, but as consumers of the products, a lot of high female consumers. So it's very, very strange that it hasn't yet been changed. But I do feel the change is coming, and you're very wise and correct to bring it up. I can't hear you, sorry.
Thank you so much. Dr. Mohammed Shafiq, you know, the SOEs serves an important instrument in any government's toolbox for societal and public value creation. Ms. Dawes has just identified a major issue regarding gender parity, in which this SOE law does not create the value proposition it should. So what in your opinion, how will this law promote greater social benefit, you know, through better management, better practices, and better implementation?
Thank you, Bulent. I will have a more of an academic take on this. My esteemed colleagues have discussed in detail lots of the aspects, and I'll try not to repeat those of things. It's just I'll share my screen, and then I'll show that where I would like to focus on, right? You mentioned that what would be the value proposition of an enterprise, and what the board and the management has to do about it, right? So it has already been discussed, but what I would like to emphasize is that although this act provides a skeletal structure and more legal framework that how the conduct of SOEs should be regulated, but it seems to me that except for a few definitions here and there, commercial and non-commercial enterprises have been clubbed together, and their functioning has been collated. So we need to see that they have not only as a category, they have different functions, but their performance, but as well as their governance and management also significantly differs. So for instance, when we speak of commercial enterprises, so the Act says that it should work on efficiency and profitability. Whereas private enterprise actually works on the notion of wealth maximization or profit maximization. So the question is that to what extent it has to be profitable? Does it have to be just self-sustaining or trying to cover its costs or its cost of capital and so on? So we need to think about that. And I guess that the rules of business that will be defined based on this act, they will clarify this aspect of the management. So as far as the prudence and the determination of the value proposition is concerned, as you asked, I would say that as a matter of fact, any enterprise first and foremost has to define within the scope of the mandate that has been given to it, that what it seeks to do, what contribution or value added it is meant to make. And then that is translated into what the act says, that there should be a statement of corporate intent or strategic intent, and then that is translated downwards into the strategy and the business plan of the organization, right? And then that functioning will provide the conceptual thread that will link the board with the top management team, as well as the performance of the organization, that what goals and objectives will be set and how those are intended to be pursued, and how the deviations will be corrected, and so on. And that also includes the human capital side, and then the diversity, gender diversity, particularly in the board and in the composition of top management team, as well as the composition of the overall, the labor force working within the organization. So I hope that I adequately addressed your question.
Thank you so much. Abdul Rahim Surya Saab, you've been an exemplary auditor, chartered accountant. You've served as the president of the ICAP organization. The role of auditors, both external and internal, extremely important for the SOE. They bear, I think, a very heavy responsibility and a lot of pressures to ensure that financial transparency is ensured in each SOE they audit. Would you comment on whether this act clearly defines the role of and responsibility of auditors, and what issues do you see for your community that may arise in this regard? Professional issues, of course.
Thank you, Sohail sir. As you know, that the requirement for roles and responsibility auditors are already very well defined in Companies Act. So I think Mr. Miftah Ismail did a right thing and a wise thing that he did not repeat everything here. The law covers, and also the rules and regulation of Institute of Chartered Accountants in Pakistan also take care for all those things. If you read the auditor's report format, which was revised in line with the international auditing standards in 2018, it takes care of all the things very clearly. It defines the role of board, because the board and the management is basically responsible. Board role is to oversee the company's financial reporting process, and the management is responsible for the preparation and fair presentation. And SOE Act very well covered this thing by inserting few things very interesting, like they have asked all SOEs to prepare their financial statement as per IFRS. And then they have also prescribed not only to make an annual report, but they have suggested its contents in Schedule 6. It's a good step. Further, they have, for the convenience of the stakeholder, they have suggested for transparency a summary of the annual report. Now, the auditor role is to ensure the transparency, and auditors' activities are covered through their own regulations. As you know, in Pakistan, ICAP is a self-regulating body, and over and above, its activities are overseen by the Audit Oversight Board, which was formed in December 2016, based on the recommendation of the ROSC. ROSC is an exercise which is carried out by World Bank and IMF. In 2005, they suggested, but ultimately in 2016, ACCP, State Bank, and ICAP, and Ministry of Finance, these four are the nominating authorities. They formed Audit Oversight Board. And over and above, there is an SECP. And SECP is very active also in the term when if there is anything, they have a good enforcement cell. And if anything is not online for the auditors, so they keep in line auditors also for this. So I think there is no much requirement to be inserted here. I mean, other laws are very well in place to take care of this, right? And if you see the recent audit report format announced in 2018, it is in line with the international auditing standard. It talks about the other information, and other information are those information which are other than financial statement and auditor's report. So it talks about all the whole area of annual report, and then also it includes key audit matters. So I think
so do you think a statement of compliance would have been beneficial in this law?
I think it's not much beneficial even in corporate governance, because if you see, it is basically the duty of the regulator to monitor what they've done intelligently. They outsource it to the third party, to the auditors. And if you read the report formats, there are few disclaimers which may not serve the purpose, because whatever the auditor express, it is based on the management representation. So I think too much bureaucratic hurdles will be created, because the first duty is of the management and the directors to take care. So compliance may create further bureaucratic channels, I think.
Thank you. So my final question to you is about one specific provision, that's Section 30 of the SOE Act. Now, Section 30 requires all independent directors to annually submit their assets and the beneficial held investments and properties to the board in the form of a report. And if there's any changes to it, they're also required to disclose that and report it within a short period of time. Do you think this provision would discourage quality independent directors to agree to serve on SOE boards?
I don't think so, because already all the responsible citizens are filer. They are filing their income tax return, wealth tax returns, and it's again a government institute where they have to submit. So they don't have harm, and generally it will not affect. But just for the sake of encouraging professional and to remove their fear, it would be better if this condition is not applicable for independent directors. This is my suggestion.
I would ask Zafar Khan Saab to also give his reaction to this, and also discuss whether there should be proper rules regarding right to privacy in case all independent directors are required to disclose their financial data. Sir, aap mute pe, sorry.
If you ask the independent directors to give a lot of details on their financial assets, etc., I think it will discourage people to come on the boards, right? At least that's my sense, because once you disclose it, it's the public sector, then that data goes all around. You have no control on it, and I think that is a cause of concern. Conflict of interest, clearly वो declaration होनी चाहिए as independent director, or any time the scenario changes, he or she should make that declaration. ये तो एक clear चीज हो गई. Secondly, जैसे Abdur Rahman ने कहा, the people who are on these boards, they'll probably all be taxpayers. तो वो अपना NIC number दे देंगे. NIC number में है कि भाई they are proper tax return वाले. बस उस पे आप छोड़ दें. अब क्या जरूरत है कि मैं डिक्लेयर करूं कि जी मेरे पास एक इस्लामाबाद में भी प्लॉट है, या उधर है, या उधर है, या I think that just adds, and it will just create more harassment for people. So in short, my response is select good people. They should be taxpayers. उनके tax return government के पास हैं. Conflict of interest policy को enforce करें, clear होनी चाहिए, and people should make declaration. That's my suggestion.
And but the issue is, sir, that the laws already now makes this a requirement. Unfortunately, I think we need to now focus on appropriate privacy rules on how to regulate this. It's again another added layer of unnecessary regulation. and detracting from the main focus, which is to improve SOE performance and get them to contribute to the national budget.
And Bulant, if I could just interject here and say there is also a provision in this law to take action against independent directors for misconduct. And that includes failure to perform your responsibilities as a director. So does that ipso facto mean if your SOE is not making money, it's making a loss, that you're not fulfilling your responsibilities as a director? And I think that is also a discouragement.
Absolutely, ma'am. And while there's additional burdens on the independent director, which we've noticed, the Act does not prescribe any sanction imposing power with respect to the failure of the various federal government divisions. Nosheen, would you, as a lawyer, comment on that? In the absence of sanction imposing power, how will they ensure that the requirements of the law is fulfilled, met in a timely manner, and that all the wheels work together properly?
Yeah, so I think as Zafar Khan Sahab also mentioned, deadlines. So there are no deadlines in terms of the cabinet committee. There are no deadlines as to when this central monitoring unit is going to be set up. And then when you're required to get decisions from the government, there are no deadlines. And of course, in business, timeliness is very, very important. So that's one part of it, the lack of deadlines. And then, of course, the lack of accountability and sanctions. The boards are being made accountable. The independent directors, as you rightly said, are being made accountable. They are having to disclose a lot of information. But if the federal government does not do its part under this act, where is the enforcement mechanism for that? It seems to be lacking.
Gee, absolutely. Would you agree with that, Zafar Saab?
Yes, I think the point has been well made. Yeah, I don't.
Thank you. Dr. Junaid, please. Sir, you're on mute.
There are quite a few things that are coming to mind because what I am seeing is more of the same, and that's what we are slowly coming down to. Okay, actually, there is no preamble to this act. Why the government of Pakistan thought it necessary that they need to bring in this law? They needed to have identified the basic reasons for this. What kind of losses are being made, and what perhaps needs to be done, and how it has hurt the economy, and because of that, what the government is planning to do in order to rectify the situation. We were also talking about technology, and Amir Hashmi Saab and Javed Iqbal Saab talked about it. मैं सबकी तवज्जो एक बात बहुत important चीज पे दिलाना चाहता हूँ. The State Bank of Pakistan took the lead in automating itself, and as a result, all the banks in the country automated themselves. And today, Pakistan's banking sector perhaps is one of the only sector of the economy which has been automated and digitalized. The biggest loss-making sector of Pakistan's state-owned enterprises are the 20 plus units in the power sector. And with line losses and not being able to collect their bills and inefficient management, etc., you're talking of anywhere between 34 to 50% losses. Now, these power companies are not automated, and they have done nothing. Now, I believe that by bringing in an SOE Act, the government of Pakistan, in the preamble itself, should have very clearly stated why are we doing it and what is the purpose. And if the purpose becomes clear, you can start doing things in order to achieve that purpose. Now, there is an underlying principle that they should be more efficient, but efficient for what? As I had mentioned earlier, that I continue to work with a number of state-owned enterprises. Automation अभी तक बहुत सारी organizations में उनके accounting system automate नहीं हुए. They still have खाता.
So Javed Iqbal Saab wants to respond to your comment very quickly.
Please.
Thank you, Buland Saab. Thank you, Dr. Junaid. I think this is, I like the state bank's prowess towards digitization. Out of the 33 banks in Pakistan, only about 7 or 8 have some vision that sort of takes them in that direction. Baki sare abhi tak us tarah se nahi soch rahe jis tarah unko sochna chahiye. And I know SECP has made some strides in helping organizations take them towards that vision as well. But automation in itself is the final manifestation of the entire ambit. Pehle vision badalna hai. And to your point, usko humne in state-owned enterprises की जो performance है, वो अगर पुराने ज़माने से लेके आज नए ज़माने पे लेके आनी है, तो उसमें जो delta है, जो technological or digital maturity is needed, which is measured in so many different ways, वो इनकी कैसे measure होगी? और उस maturity के बगैर, how do they go from A to B in terms of fulfilling their overall visions and where they have to go as well? So I just wanted to add that point. While the financial sector is ahead due to obvious reasons, बाकी लोगों को उसी तरह उस तरह सोचना है जिस तरह उन्होंने सोचना शुरू किया, लेकिन वो भी वहां नहीं पहुंचे अभी.
Thank you.
जावेद साहब, इसकी गालिबन वजह ये है कि here was a regulator, which was the State Bank of Pakistan, which had automated itself, and then it gave an instruction that all the 6,000 plus branches of all the commercial banks in the country will have to clear their branches accounts every day. Previously, this used to happen once in 3 months or once in 4 months or even half a year. Jab Dr. Ishrat Hussain and subsequently a number of following governors continued to process this process, isse ye sari automation hui. Now, we have got a regulator in the case of these power sector, NEPRA. NEPRA itself is not automated, and this regulator, because इसने अपने आप को automate नहीं किया है, तो इसलिए उनका पूरा जो entities उसके पास function करती हैं, उन्होंने भी नहीं किया. इसी तरह से Oil and Gas Regulatory Authority is also a regulator, and Oil and Gas Regulatory Authority ने भी अपने आप को automate नहीं किया, जिसकी वजह से जो उनके entities जिनको regulate करते हैं, वो भी automate नहीं है. Now, I believe the Act should have come out very clearly on these points. कि जनाब, ये automation होनी होगी और efficiency बढ़ाने के लिए एक और बात में बहुत important है, क्योंकि again having experience of having worked with, I can give the names of the 12 board, but that's perhaps not going to be nice. कि यहाँ लिखा हुआ है कि वो अपनी एक business plan बनाएंगे. Business plan का 95% लोगों का ख्याल ये है कि जो साल में बजट बना लेते हैं, वही हमारी बिजनेस प्लान हो जाती है. अब बजट कैसे बनता है? बजट को पिछले साल को देखा, उसमें मैंने इन्फ्लेशन लगा दी, चलो 5% लगा दो, 10% लगा दो, 15% लगा के आपने उसी फिगर्स को रिप्रोड्यूस कर दिया और कह दिया कि ये बिजनेस प्लान होगी. I mean, मैं बहुत बड़ी ऑर्गेनाइजेशन,
आपकी बात सर बिल्कुल ठीक है, बिल्कुल ठीक है. ये एक चेंज मैनेजमेंट एक्सरसाइज है जो अक्रॉस द बोर्ड लेने की जरूरत है, और इसमें ये IBA, PICG, LUMS, NAST, जितने भी मुतफरक इदारे हैं, they all have to play a role in educating governance structures across Pakistan to start thinking through measurable performance through the use of technology. Automation की जो बात करते हैं, अगर जी
नोट कीजिए कि इसके अंदर जो कुछ भी इनपुट आना है वो स्टेक होल्डर से आना है. अब इसके अंदर आपने जिन इदारों के नाम दिए हैं, people, organizations like the IBA and LUMS, and NUS and PICG and others who are actually bringing in something additional to what the so-called stakeholders bring. You will, unka koi zikr nahi hai. As a consequence, I will now sum it up in my opinion. This act is more of the same, and they have done some tweaking here or there, but it is not going to, in my opinion, there has not been a serious effort done to highlight what the issues are. And once you don't highlight the issues, then you don't know how to solve it. I mean, a realization of the problem and then taking steps for rectification. This has not been done in this particular act.
I agree with you, sir. Completely agree with you. Completely agree with you. Zabardast. Thank you.
While we're waiting for Akbar Zaidi Saab to come and conclude this session, I think I leave one question to everybody. Maybe Ms. Tara Daud can contribute, and Zafar Khan Saab and Ms. Nosheen. I think the question is the capacity of the finance division itself. And Amir Saab very astutely pointed out that if the central CPU or the central processing body is your finance division, then that's a non-starter. You know, SOEs involve so many other aspects like operations, commercial issues, risk management, data analytics, technology. How can you expect an additional director or secretary, even of finance division, to oversee this gargantuan task? I think we'll start with Ms. Daud and then Zafar Khan Saab and maybe Amir Hashmi Saab. It's open for all.
So absolutely, it is an enormous situation, particularly in companies like PSO. There's also circular debt. So there's many, many things to oversee that are seemingly larger than any one individual, put it that way. But I do personally feel that there's solutions for everything. And one step at a time is all that's required. You know, we don't have to solve it in 1 minute, but we have to begin the journey to solutions. What often happens, which has been quite frustrating in my experience, is people come up with solutions, but they're not, they're stopped on that journey to achieve those solutions. But so they often don't start. And I know that we've been doing a lot of things behind the scene to try and enforce or sort of try and achieve certain things, but often that's challenging with bureaucrats. So what would be very nice if the laws and policies that encourage things are supported by common sense and a little bit of I think, grace on the part of the decision makers, because what you're calling a gargantuan task is actually still solvable as long as people let people start the journey. And right now, in a lot of the tasks that we're facing, people are not able to get past step one.
Zafar Saab?
Yeah. Okay. By the way, I'll come to the main question that you raised. Just give me a sec. There are a couple of things I just didn't want to lose out on those because of discussion mein nahi aaye. Ek ye hai ki I've noticed in the act, you know, they talk about the audit committee, etc., but the HR committee is missing from that. And to me, that is a concern. It's a concern because, frankly, I mean, if you go around and ask anybody, and I'm sure this panel even will say the same, that the most valuable asset of any entity are its people. And the board has to have an engagement of how that critical asset is being managed, not just their inventory, receivables, and, you know, plant and machinery, but how are the humans being? So wo kyun missing hai isme? And that must be included if it is meant to be all inclusive. If the other code of corporate governance and rules apply, to theek hai, phir to ho jayega. But isme kyunki missing tha, I wanted to highlight that. Secondly, they're specifying in the act, I read somewhere, that the boards will meet every 2 months. Now, I just don't understand that. The board should meet as often as they need to. And एक minimum आप specify कर सकते हैं कि भाई वो आपको once a quarter तो मिलना है, एक extra meeting आप रख लें for your planning and strategizing and planning for the next year. So I think it every month specify nahi hona chahiye. It should say minimum of say 5 meetings in a year, which will address all of that. So I just wanted to leave that as a thought. Now, going back to the original question that you raised, I also have a serious concern about Ministry of Finance playing a pivotal role in all of this. उनका mindset different है, उनका horizon different है, business का horizon नहीं है, वो तो सिर्फ ये revenue leakage और कहाँ से पैसे आएंगे, उस तरह से आप business नहीं चला सकते. आपके बहुत सारे stakeholders होते हैं, you have to balance all of that, you have to do risk taking, you have to kind of do step out and take chances. That's what business is all about. And a guy sitting in the Ministry of Finance, they will not comprehend that so easily. That's my experience. They will second guess everything. And unnecessarily वो आपके bureaucratic processes में आप फंस जाएंगे, confrontation होती है, बदमज़गी हो जाती है, spoils the whole environment.
That's an excellent point. Hashim Saab, would you react? We just have 1 or 2 minutes left, so we'd ask you to be very brief. And
yes, thank you. I think I'll just pick up from Zafar Saab's comment and expand from there. He rightly pointed out about the Ministry of Finance, and then of course, we have short time. There's another big beast in the government called the Auditor General's Office. So जो SOEs होते हैं, ऑडिट उनके पास जाता है, और जो जफर साहब ने बताया कि फाइनेंस डिवीजन में ट्रेंड लोग नहीं होते, आप कभी मिले हैं ये जो AGPR में लोग बैठते हैं वो चेक कर रहे होते हैं आपकी बिजनेस प्लान का रेवेन्यू. They go into presentations and ask questions on or domain expertise that they've never even been trained or read about. So that's another horrific story of why professionals don't come into SOEs. But quickly, Bulent, I did do the homework that you'd asked. Chapter 9, monitoring performance, and it's item 31, page 16. Now, central monitoring units to establish in the finance division. Now, this document hasn't been well thought out, what I said in the beginning. And who did this? Statement of corporate intent and business plans. उनको बिल्कुल इस चीज की समझ नहीं है, right? Then item 2, overall performance of state enterprises. Performance of state enterprise against primary objectives, business goals, and performance targets and benchmarks. When you're not involved in the day-to-day management, finance ministry, as young as a section officer or a deputy secretary, starts questioning a seasoned chairman of CEO at the Pakistan Business Council level, and then they just push everyone away from the public sector, right? And I'll give you a live example so everyone can jot this down. And please, for all the audience, go to a website called Invest India, and you've probably seen a gentleman, Deepak Bagla or something, former Standard Chartered's managing director, WhatsApp groups में सारे भेज रहे हैं कि यार in India ने क्या कर लिया, so it's viral. But go and look at his management team. I think he was appointed in 2015 from a global Standard Chartered level, and the Indian government invited him. And look at the KPIs that he was able to achieve in a SOE. So that is an SOE. It's government owned, right? The 2 words I'll use, dynamic and agile. And I'll share a case study of SSGA with you, and I'll send you guys our performance report. Is the Prime Minister requested me at the cabinet, can we make a state organization dynamic and agile like Singapore? So of course, I did my research and I said, of course, it's possible. You'll have it, allow it to have an enabling environment and hire the best people globally. Silicon Valley में अगर लोग बैठे हुए हैं, technologists, London में बैठे हैं, या Middle East में बैठे हैं, attract them. And they do pretty well, so they don't come for the salary, they come for a vision. So I think Zafar Saab has mentioned it, Dr. Junaid has mentioned it, Nosheen has mentioned it, most panelists, Javed has talked about the human capital is the most important part of the SOE. And this document has nothing on how you're going to get the best talent to come into these SOEs so they can perform for the country. In fact, I hope no one minds, we probably may have the worst SOEs performance globally. We may, because I've studied them a lot, and I get to travel the world and see how SOEs are performance. We may have the worst performance in the world, and that's due to the culture of the human capital involvement. That's the main culture. Corruption aside, everything connects to the people running an organization. You have efficient people based on merit, corruption won't be there, efficiencies will come, domain expertise will be there, revenue growth will be there, shareholders, as you've talked a lot about the board, Zafar Saab, bilkul, autonomy word use karte hain. Come meetings at the PM office, board members were allowed to come in from other offices and take confidential data out from a board meeting. So governance to ab kya kahun. But I'm really appreciative of this start. I've learned today, Dr. Junaid, Zafar Saab se, Nosheen se, I'm so happy that Javed has shared why digital transformation is so important. And what I'm going to do is share with you all a report that we did at the STGA as I was resigning. And the government asked, why are you giving a performance report? We haven't asked for it. So most of the government officials, seniors, did on the board, government officials did. They didn't read it, but the private sector, maine saaron ko bheji, private sector mein, they were really appreciative that it's only a year old, the Special Technology Zone Authority, and it's given a performance report. Why was it created and what did it do? Sanction technology zones in 5 provinces in 6 months so that an ecosystem of the best professionals around the world can come. So it's a very good case study, I think, that IBA can use. So with that, I think the critical message I'd leave with the audience is study, invest India, Singapore, China, because North American case studies won't apply in our culture. We're more aligned with the Asian culture. Recently, I've been going to Saudi Arabia a lot and the UAE. Saudi and Dubai and Abu Dhabi are competing for the best talent in the world. Their SOEs are remarkable. I was meeting director generals at the age of 30 and 35. So I talked to the senior hierarchy. They said, Amar, we sent them out to Ivy Leagues. They've come back. We've put them into state organizations so that they can deliver with strong KPIs. And the GCC was behind us. How come they were able to bring top talent, give them top jobs in the state-owned enterprises in Saudi Arabia and the Dubai and Abu Dhabi and deliver on KPIs? They're rich. They didn't need these jobs, right? So leadership. The leadership said, we want to empower our youth to take decisions for the state and be accountable. So Zafar Saab also mentioned the word Baba. I think Pakistan's at a tipping point where the Baba culture actually will have a progressive change to our youth, because I think someone mentioned 130 million under the age of 30, but I look at 40 as a cusp of maturity of a CEO. A dynamic young CEO can be a managing partner at 40. Under 40, हमारी populace 170 पे आ जाती. So 140 people will be engaged in SOCs if Pakistan has to be a progressive, economical, viable state. So I think that session has started. Universities are pumping out 50,000 students at least in engineering and computer sciences, where we need it for the tech world. There's a lot of other things happening in social sciences. So I think sessions like this are so critical. And my request to IBA was, if you can expand this onto a larger stage where a lot of students can also join in. I know we have senior professionals, but with that, I think I'll conclude. I can go on and on because this is a subject very close to my heart. But I really appreciate Zafar Saab, Nosheen, Dr. Junaid, Javed, Saab, and of course, Uzra, and Kamran and Bulent for holding this. I had to study last night of all the documents. So I was telling Bulent and Kamran, I'm printing everything out and I'm making notes. So it was a lot of homework, but worth it. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So thank you very much, everyone, for joining us. And for last 15 years, believe me, all the panelists are studying this state-owned enterprise coming in January 31, 2023 this year. And IB has been pushing all their limits. And thank you for reading out. Thank you for your recommendations. In the next phase, we plan to bring recommendations of this webinar in a paper format with our panelists, and we'll be floating this public to all the audiences present here. And we'll be floating this to state-owned enterprise, even to National Assembly and those who have written this paper, the Act and the SECP, the regulatory body. I would like to thanks to all the, I cannot name, we are close to the time, all the panelists taking out time this Friday, and very special acknowledgement to our moderators, Bulent Sohail. He has been instrumental in shaping up this webinar. All the credit goes to him. And from IBS platform, I would like to conclude that we are here as experts. So we bring all the experts together from this platform. And if you need our help in any way through training, consulting, or any input you want from our expert panel, we are here. Come back to us, and we are here to serve you and help you. Thank you so much for joining us today. See you all soon.
Thank you, Kamran and Sohail sir.
And digital transformation is a way forward, in my opinion.
Indeed and inshallah. Khuda Hafiz.
Khuda Hafiz.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you, Bulent Sohail sir, Zafar sir.
Can you end the webinar? Yamna, can you end the webinar, please? Thank you. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Bulent. Thank you, Bulent. You were excellent. Thank you. Khuda Hafiz.